Nice day, real good work today. Of course, Friday, red zone, goal line, short yardage. Any questions?
Sean, you guys have had pretty good success in a frantic mode offensively over the last 3 weeks. How much are you really wanting to see a calmer, drive the ball, take
I think, listen, I think, let's be honest, I think we want to start better. And so, whether time's coming off the clock or it's not, we've got to work on our first half. And I thought, the point of emphasis this week with the whole group, they handled it well, and you got to find a way to make Wednesdays like Sunday. And sometimes that's challenging, but that's one of the things that you look at as a coach, even after a big win. All right, there are a lot of things that need fixing.
Do you speed them up, Sean, in that regard? Do you compress time on them before you do things?
Well, I think more than any of that, if I felt it was tempo driven,
I guess we need more.
But I think the attention to detail, the huddle, and those reps that were taken on Wednesday, how do we create more stress and urgency Wednesday, Thursday, so that when Sunday comes, I think that's important.
Anything specific on the cause of Bo's number of tip passes he had last week?
How many do you have that were tipped?
About 5 or 6.
Really? Sometimes with a certain rush, teams are pretty good at deciding, hey, if we're not getting home and it's coming out. But I think nothing that I would address, meaning his motion, and they probably all were happening, a lot of it's probably route driven too. But nothing remarkable relative to that standing out as one of the things that we want to clean up.
You've been one of the best defensively third down red zone, and you have a performance that's a little bit of an anomaly, long distance conversions last week. Is there a risk of overcorrecting or how?
No, I think there's always these learning reps that you have to see it. All right, it's much easier to correct when you come off a win with it, but certainly, talking with Vance, that you look at all the elements to what you want to play, how you want to handle. Because, look, there's 3rd and long in this first half. And then we're not in the business of conceding 20 yards and making a tackle. But then there's 4th and 18, end of game, where now you'd like to be seeing everything top down. All of that, that kind of goes right in there with what we're discussing as key points of changes, points of emphasis to work on.
Starting right after the game, you started talking about how important it is to bounce back after that emotional. How have you felt the team's focus has been?
Good. Just point to the analytics, and I mentioned it. It happened to me one other time. Washington Commanders, 17, I think it was. We were 15 down, 2:31 left. 2-minute score, kickoff. We hold them to 3 and out. They punt, get the ball, 2-minute score, go for 2, tie the game, overtime, win the toss, score, and it's when you want to run in the locker room before anyone. And then I asked our department, Mark was the guy in New Orleans. I said, hey, I want the record after large comeback. Well, we got to define large comeback. So call it south of 5 minutes, 15 points or more, last 25 years, and it's a remarkable 3 or and 15. So we addressed that right away, and I didn't in New Orleans. I didn't. Much like away before London, that was addressed right at the beginning. We didn't even talk about the L word. before we played Philly, and that was coming off a Monday night game. But nonetheless, away before London, we talked about the Chiefs game, our first win against the Chiefs in 23. They were on the road before, and oftentimes these other distractions can come up, and so this is one of those challenges where you look at the analytics and you say, hey, listen, and I think, look, they get it.
Sean, I thought Trey Vincent said yesterday that Justin Sternad got fined for his, actions after the game the other day. Do you think what he did warranted a fine?
Oh, I'm not going to comment on that because over the years I've learned it doesn't matter. My opinion relative to that doesn't matter.
Did you incur any kind of fine for running on the field at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Sean, we asked.
Thanks for bringing it to everyone's attention, though.
Okay.
We asked Riz yesterday about the weapon that Aubrey is. How does that change things as maybe advance? And you
Say it again.
with Aubrey's leg and strength, what kind of weapon he is compared to maybe even other kickers.
Yeah, look.
How does that change this week?
And certainly at altitude, there's a confidence level they have, and we've talked about the rush plan, left hash. You can tell exactly where the ball is going to travel. It's a 4-iron over the right guard's head, and so relative to how you handle it, and possibly putting Mims back or a returner back if it falls short. But that's a weapon. He's got an extremely talented leg, and if it doesn't make it, then you get the possession there. So, but there's confidence they have, and I understand why. He's tremendous with his leg strength, and then certainly coming to altitude. Just watch pregame.
Coach Devontae, the Children's Hospital announced your donation. Why was that important for you?
Yeah, so we worked heavily in New Orleans with Children's. There was one nearby. And when we got here, we found out where it was located. We took a tour a year and a half ago, and there were 4 or 5 things they were considering. And we just felt there wasn't anything outside, and so the outdoor playground was something that we thought would be fantastic. And then lo and behold, the other day it was done. And so, you have a hectic game, and then you make a trip and you spend some time with those kids, and it kind of puts it in perspective, But I was really excited with the job they did, and we'll continue to work with them.
Sean, Javonte Williams said, I think this week, it was kind of a mutual parting of the ways, in free agency. Did you guys sense that you guys both just wanted to go?
Well, I don't listen. It's a great question, man. I'm one of his biggest fans, and so there's always that. What's the market? And I think that he found a great opportunity, and I'm like. You talk about you guys covered him longer than I coached him, but a tremendous guy, a tremendous player, smart. So I'm happy to see the success he's having. I'm glad he's in the NFC. And I remember he said to me when Belichick got hired, I guess at North Carolina you get an allotment of Jordan shoes if you graduate. Right? And then, he came out early, so his allotment was in the equipment room somewhere, and he said, do you think you could call Belichick so I could get my Jordans? and I said, I'll work on that, so I still have to do that for him. But they're at the top of the league offensively for a lot of reasons. The tight end, the skill receivers, the running back, the quarterback, those pieces that you look for. And, our defense will get tested. So look forward to the challenge.
You guys brought JK in. Did you identify him, though, at the beginning of the
Well, we kept track of him, and there wasn't this, we kept track, and then we felt like the experience would help a young room. And then I've mentioned this before. Sometimes you get much more than you from a leadership. His all those things that you don't know what you're getting that are positive. I love his. He's got an infectious personality. He loves playing. Smile on his face. All of that was extra, besides just the runner you saw in film.
How intriguing do you find this? You touched upon a minute ago this matchup. I mean, they've got the number one offense, and you've got perhaps the best defense. Kind of a something's got to give game. Or?
Well, I think generally speaking, there are going to be plays made on both sides of the ball, and games. I've said this before. You have to pay attention as the game's unfolding. Sometimes they unfold differently than you may think, but it's a team. It's a good team. You look at their record when the receivers are all healthy, and they've been real tough to defend. They're coming off obviously a big win last week, so each team's playing for a lot, and both are keeping pace in their division, and it's an important game for both teams.
Jerry Jones said today that there's no coach he respects more than you. What do you remember about?
Yeah, so I had 3 great years there. My first year after the season, I went out and interviewed for the Oakland Raiders head job and was offered the job by the late Al Davis. That was an amazing experience, and I had purchased the black suit, the silver tie, everything. When you're young, you're driving 150 miles an hour. Like there are only 32 of these jobs, and then Bill called. He was down in Florida. I remember the conversation. He said, "I want to talk to you more like a father than the head coach," and he gave me reasons why to stay, and then the phone rang, and it was Jerry. Asked me to come over to his house. And so if Jerry's the last guy you see, you're probably staying. And look, I was young, and it ended up being the right decision. And then a few years later, there were a handful of opportunities. But he was tremendous to work with. And he's got a passion. He's done more for this game than, it's unbelievable what he brought to the league. And when you see any of the documentaries, he's enjoyable to work with, and I learned a ton there. That 3-year period there with Bill and with the Jones family and that organization, I knew I was going to be a head coach, but to be a good head coach, or one that survives the first 3 years, as Bill would say, that was important.
Sean, you were on the competition committee.
He actually considered you several times.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 stories I'll tell later in a book.
Okay.
There's one that's unbelievable. Mickey Loom. There's one that's I told Patrick it today. That's for a book. But I think when I went to New Orleans, I think oftentimes in New Orleans, year 4, year 5, whatever, after the Super Bowl, you're not going to leave for doubt. You're not going to leave for. That was like always. And year 15, I'm like, I'm here. So I think there were oftentimes were those discussions maybe, but I think he said it best, the timing and how everything was just, it was what it was, and I think from both sides there's a ton of respect.
Sean, all those years on the competition committee, how close did y'all get, or how often were the conversations about defensive pass interference being too punitive, and do you think that conversation will come back around when you look at?
I don't recall. Look, the big hot button topic the one year was after the no call, and I think it's not the pass interference foul. I think the playoffs are officiated by all-star crews, and I think that's difficult in that instead of taking the top crew and assigning them games where we work together all season, right at that moment there's a young official with the right view and a veteran official who doesn't have quite the same view, and then at that moment it's the first time they've ever worked together, and the young official acquiesces Whereas if he's working with the same back judge he'd worked with all season, it's much easier to say, no, I saw it. And so there were so many different topics. The challenge always, I think, in officiating, and we talk about it all the time, is how do we reduce what we're asking them? How do we reduce the variables to make it easier? And I think that when we add, it becomes more challenging, But the biggest, the holding, the interference, and the roughing the passer, those are like those three. You're trying to get all 17 crews to officiate it the same way, which is a challenge.
But the punishment for pass interference, 30 yards, 40 yards.
Yeah, I think that comes up. The college rule. Haven't been on that committee so long. There's certain things that come up every 5 years. The reseeding. There's certain things you just see that come up every 5 years. I kind of like our rules. Now, the one thing that was interesting that changed is not too long ago, the defender can push a receiver to keep him from getting his second foot down. So when that rule changed, the field got just a smidge tighter, not as wide. And so we've always been get 2 feet in, but by doing that, you become somewhat vulnerable, and so, I would down the road advocate for that one to get the field back to its width. That's just, you have these certain things. I think this kickoff thing that was, we're kind of going down a road where we, now it's the 35. That's been remarkable relative to field position, end of games, like maybe more than we even, you can't predict what it's going to be like, but all of us would agree, like, holy cow, the ball's going to be at the 30-some yard line, and now you're 2 plays away from, a field goal. And we used to always position ourselves for those punts, and a punt that goes into the end zone now, I look at it like, shoot the 20, they're backed up. It's not as so it's interesting over the years to just track the changes. And I think by and large, we discuss it and do a good job talking about it, and the intentions are there.
Sean, I think NFL put out a gambling memo today. Do you have the conversations?
Absolutely. I think I'm going to tie my shoe. I think that, look, we had it here just relative to a player maybe back in college, and so that topic comes up every year. There's a certain amount of presentations, and it's it hits heavy. In other words, man. So obviously it hits the sports world, and someone that's a close friend to many of us, myself included, in it, and you hate it. So obviously none of it's worth it, and when you look at like the monies, it was like so. But that's one of the challenges when you invite, when we made that flip, so we got to be pretty diligent on that.